It appeared that her husband had decided he needed to work out at 1 o'clock in the morning. She highly doubted that this exercise was being done alone. And since she was back in Denton, whomever he was working out with was certainly not her.
This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition. Short stories, Irreconcilable Differences, Part 5. When we left off, Anya had put Ron out of their home. Sis had changed the locks and the code. She'd had his stuff packed up and moved to his old house. And when he tried to goad her in a text message, she'd insinuated that he'd been pretending to live at his old house and now he no longer needed to. Home alone with their 2-year-old son, RJ, and their 2-week-old daughter, River K, Anya was focused on how she was going to put her life back together. The only person in her family who was in the know about all the goings-on between Anya and Ron was her mother, the Queen Mother. And Bella Baptiste St. James was none too pleased. It goes without saying that she did not play about her children, and she damn sure didn't play about her baby girl. But the list of reasons why she was pissed off was long as hell. Her daughter should be resting and enjoying her postpartum period. Her son-in-law should be right at home, taking care of his wife and children. And her daughter should have gotten way more information about exactly what her husband was doing before she'd made these haphazard decisions. Of course, the Queen Mother had offered to dig into Ron's movements, his financials, and have his technology hacked. But Anya had turned her down as the Queen Mother drove to the family complex in Denton to check on her daughter and her grandchildren. She was perplexed, thinking about the dichotomy between Regina and Anya. On one hand, Regina was hell-bent on finding out what went on with her husband and best friend more than 15 years before. And on the other hand, here was Anya, adamant that her marriage was over solely based on her gut feeling. Anya had told her that she didn't need proof. The minute she believed that her husband couldn't be trusted, their marriage was irreconcilable. And that was that on that. Anya texted she locked him out of the house, had all of his stuff packed up, and moved to his other house. She dropped everything and had her driver bring her to the family complex. And when she walked into Anya's house, she found RJ playing on the floor in the living room, River K dozing in her bassinet, and Anya laying on the couch staring at the ceiling. She flashed the light to get Anya's attention and then signed, "What the hell is going on? I know damn well you didn't do all of this just based on a gut feeling. What do you know?" Anya signed, "It's over, Mommy. That's all that matters. The last thing I need is for this to become a family scandal. I have 2 children who still need their father alive." The Queen Mother said, "The only person's actions that I'm responsible for are mine. I give you my word that I will respect whatever you decide. If you decide that he lives, then I won't be the reason why he doesn't. But I need to know what exactly happened since you and I talked last." The last time that Anya and her mother spoke about her marital issues, Anya was undecided about how she was going to handle the situation with Ron. Yes, she told her that her gut told her that Ron was hiding something, that she believed he was unfaithful. But she believed it was more than that. At the same time, she didn't want to have to pry or dig to find out what he should be telling her willingly. She used events from the recent past as examples of occasions where people knew what they knew without having concrete evidence. The situation with True and Big Wood and him having slept with Amira. The situation with the Queen Mother and Pop Sandy and him having an emotional affair of sorts with India. The mother of Jeff, who she'd said was Pop Sandy's, but turned out to be Pop Sandy's father. The situation with Q and Amora and his old captain at the North Carolina Police Department. And yes, the situation with LJ, Regina, and Angela. And while that situation was still unresolved and no proof was provided that LJ and Angela had done anything behind Regina's back, the speculation was enough to create whispers and have Regina and LJ going through a divorce. Anya revealed that she and LJ had had a conversation, and LJ had explained to Anya exactly why he'd refused to give Regina an answer to her question, and why he'd asked Angela not to either. He told her all about why he'd stopped taking cases for people who suspected that their spouses were being unfaithful, unless, of course, there was some danger involved or a potential crime, a victim that needed to be protected. LJ had no idea that when he told Anya the advice that he would give to people seeking his services about trust, trustworthiness, and following their gut, that she would use that to decide her marriage was over. When that first conversation between the Queen Mother and Anya ended, Anya had agreed not to do anything rash. The Queen Mother had told her that she could decide internally that her marriage was over and still stay in the marriage. She could bide her time and wait for whatever was going on in the dark to come to the light so that she could continue to have the support that she needed for herself and her children. Anya had agreed, so the Queen Mother knew that something had to have happened. Anya signed, "Medea, you have to give me your word that you're not going to tell Q, Donovan, anybody You have to promise that you're going to let me handle this myself, my way. Ron is not going to make a divorce easy. But when it's all over, I want to at least be able to co-parent with him. And that's not going to happen if you make him public enemy number one. The Queen Mother said, did he do something to you? Are you about to tell me that that man did something and you want me to pretend like he didn't? You want me to smile and grin in his face, what, for the next 18 years? You know, we don't do divorce in this family. Anya said, I want to try to do it amicably. That means I don't need any interference. The Queen Mother said, fine, child. Whatever you tell me is between you and I. You have my word. And then Anya used sign language to weave a tale that proved what goes on in the dark always comes to the light in the most unexpected ways. Meanwhile, at Ron's other house in Dallas, Ron was pissed. In the middle of his living room was box after box of everything that belonged to him. Anya had even packed up his toothbrush and toothpaste, every sock, every pair of drawers, every pen, paper, and post-it note in his office. The effort had to have taken hours, and she had to have had help. And she had to have been planning it for days. Poor Ron was racking his brain, trying to figure out what exactly Anya knew, when, and how. In his mind, if it was about his business dealings, she wouldn't have said anything about the other house. So he needed to know what it was that his wife knew so that he could do what he always did. Anytime his wife questioned him about where he was, what he was doing, he always had a story prepared. As a matter of fact, he never let her question him about where he was or what he was doing. He'd volunteer a story to ensure that she didn't have a reason to question him. So he was running through in his mind the last few days of their lives, trying to figure out where he'd effed up. Did he tell her something that was not true that she had a way to verify? He'd routinely change the passcode on his cell phones and the passwords on his laptops. He left the phone that she didn't know about in his car every day when he went home, and the personal phone that she knew about in his office anytime he had a reason to visit his house in Dallas. In his mind, he'd outsmarted his wife. But even though she wasn't in the life, she had relationships and access that made tracking him electronically possible. And while she wasn't argumentative by nature, she was smart and fully capable of digging if she had a mind to. So he wasn't putting anything past her. Instead of continuing to try to figure out what she knew, he decided to shift gears. If he couldn't outthink her, he was going to have to outmaneuver her. He had an ace card, and he didn't want to have to use it, but he was willing to, if that's what it took to keep his marriage intact and keep his business intact. He loved Anya, but marrying her was really a power move. Back when his frat brother and friend Q got married, he'd put the pieces together and figured out that his boy was connected.
While it was clear that Q wasn't involved, Ron wanted to be.
He knew that there was big money to be made, representing individuals involved in an international criminal enterprise. So discovering that Q's little sister was fine, single, and deaf, just like his little sister, provided him with the perfect opportunity to weasel his way in. When Christian Daniels, the older brother of King, the boy who'd essayed Anya when she was 12 years old, showed up in Dallas looking for revenge, Anya's defense of herself provided him with the perfect opportunity. In an effort to protect her, he was able to fast-track their marriage.
And he had ironclad proof that not only had she been assaulted, but that she'd severely injured Christian in the process, and Donovan had cleaned it all up. When it was discovered that she was pregnant and she was unsure of whether Christian or Ron was the father, they'd taken a DNA test. And unfortunately, Anya had miscarried before those results had come back. Ron had insisted that they didn't need the results. But what Anya didn't know is that he'd gotten them. And he was, in fact, not that baby's father. Donovan had effectively made all of the questions go away and gotten Detective Erickson, who'd come from New York, to investigate Christian's disappearance, to head back home. But all it would take was a phone call to reopen Pandora's box. And he knew, if nothing else, Anya would want to protect her brother. And that would be all the incentive she'd need to let him come back home. So he wasn't going to unpack a damn thing. They might not live happily ever after, but they would not be getting a divorce. At least not until he had all the money he needed to retire in the lap of luxury and do whatever he wanted to do, wherever he wanted to do it, and with whomever he wanted to do it. Marriages and relationships ended. That wasn't a big deal to him. But he knew that if Anya made weight, if they actually separated and divorced, his ability to continue working for the families would be on the line, and he'd be losing his cash cow. It wasn't easy money. He had to work for it. He was taking huge risks with his career, his safety, his freedom. But the money he was making hand over fist made it all worth it. And that would all be gone the minute Catherine found out that her efforts to help him hide his comings and goings had not only helped him hide from his wife and the rest of the family, that he was working for the Notorious Five Families, but it had also helped him hide from his wife that he was unfaithful. He didn't really want to have to stoop that low,
bringing up what he knew was traumatic for his wife,
but if it would allow him to keep all that he'd created
and keeping Anya's brothers from unaliving him,
he was more than willing to go there.
To get Anya to play ball. Meanwhile, he needed to do some damage control. He needed to ensure that the security that Catherine had assigned to him weren't reporting his movements to anybody. The technology that he had in place at his Dallas home wasn't accessible to his wife. None of his devices had been bugged. And that's what he turned his attention to. Over at Anya and Ron's house at the family complex in Denton, Anya had just told the Queen Mother the information that had fallen in her lap several mornings earlier. She'd been up taking care of her children and scrolling on her cell phone when she'd gotten an alert from Apple Fitness Plus telling her that the 12-week challenge she and her husband had started had ended. A challenge that she'd forgotten all about, considering that the last few months, exercising had not been her number one priority. She wasn't at all surprised to see that her husband had won the challenge. He'd obviously continued working out, but apparently his last workout had been that morning at 2 a.m. His Apple Watch had logged a 50-minute workout that didn't just include the date, time, and his heart rate, but it also included the coordinates for where that workout was completed. And when she checked those coordinates, she discovered that her husband, who told her he was in his office working into the early morning hours with his coworkers, had actually been at his house in Dallas, where there would not have been any workout equipment for him to use at 2 a.m. As she scrolled through his most recent workouts, she discovered that his heart rate had been elevated a number of other times during times that he'd volunteered to tell her he'd been in one meeting or another, in a planning session, holding a deposition, or meeting with a client, none of which should have included exercise. Exercise that lasted anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, off and on, of course. And just in her cursory view, it was clear that there was a pattern. This exercise was occurring at his house in Dallas.
On one occasion, it had occurred at a hotel in Maryland, during a time when he said he needed to make a turnaround trip to D.C. to appear in federal court in order to handle an in-person motion for a civil rights violation case for their nonprofit. While D.C. was in fact smack dab in the middle of the DMV, the hotel in Maryland wasn't even remotely close to the federal courthouse in D.C. It appeared that her husband had decided he needed to work out at 1 o'clock in the morning. She highly doubted that this exercise was being done alone. And since she was back in Denton, whomever he was working out with was certainly not her.
When the Queen Mother asked Anya if she'd found out who the other woman or women were, Anya said she couldn't have cared less. Whoever she was could have him. Obviously, Ron thought it was worth it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the risk, even if he did think that she would have never found out. The Queen Mother told her daughter that she didn't necessarily agree with that. She said, some men do what they can, and others do what they want. The difference between the two is opportunity and effect. It looks to me like Ron took advantage of the totality of the current circumstances. And he had some reason to believe that he could do whatever he wanted without it having this particular effect. You're worried about me telling your brothers, but I think you have another thing to worry about, daughter. Your husband has always given me the impression that he thinks he's the smartest person in any room. So I'm real comfortable saying that he was probably pretty sure that you wouldn't catch him. You might suspect, but you wouldn't be able to get any proof. And I'm sure he was under the impression that without proof, you wouldn't take any action. But I think it's deeper than that. Now, I completely understand you not wanting to dig and find evidence to support your decision to end your marriage. But considering the circumstances that necessitated your elopement, I think that we can both agree that it's in all of our best interest for you to let me know immediately if he even makes mention of it. And for me to do some digging. I get that there are men out there who claim to love their wives, but they're still unfaithful. But something about Ron's love and loyalty for you has never rung true for me. Defensive, Anya feverishly signed. Why? Because I'm deaf? Does everything always come back to that? The Queen Mother said, of course not. Because he's always been way too interested in Five Family business. He was entirely too eager to represent Angela in that situation with Amora, despite the fact that there was a clear conflict of interest. And on several occasions, I've heard about him asking questions about things that aren't any of his concern. So do what you need to do for you and your children. But the minute he says or does anything that looks like manipulation, that looks like he's trying to take advantage of that situation that he tried to help you out of, I need to be your first phone call. Meanwhile, I'll be looking into how else he's benefiting from being married to you other than having love, loyalty, and legacy. Hearing that, poor Anya's head was swimming. There was never a day in her life with Ron where she felt like he didn't love her, like he wasn't as invested in their marriage as she was. They'd had their difficulties, their hiccups, like any other marriage, but he'd been good to her. They'd had a healthy sex life, and they'd established a comfortable rhythm. And to Anya, it sounded like her mother was insinuating that not only did Ron have other motives for being with her, but he would fight to stay in the marriage, despite the fact that he was clearly being unfaithful, not because he loved and wanted to be with her, but because he was benefiting somehow, and that he might use the very thing that necessitated their elopement against her to force her to stay with him. And she feverishly signed as much. In response, the Queen Mother said, "Baby girl, two things can be true at the same time. A man can love and want to be with you solely because he sees you as his key to success. I get that he was successful before you all married, but wouldn't you agree that he's become a lot more successful since then? When you all married, Hobbs and Associates was a one-man show. It's now a six-partner, seven, including Ron, influential firm in the Dallas area. And because he owns the firm, he makes money every time one of the other attorneys make money. And while the nonprofit is just that, and it was your idea, it has brought him significant notoriety, and it appears to have kept his paid calendar pretty full. Wouldn't you agree?" When Anya agreed, the Queen Mother said, "And that's just on face value. But when I'm done digging, I'll not only have uncovered it all, but I will guarantee that you will have at your disposal the arsenal you need to ensure that this divorce goes over smoothly. And Ron has a vested interest in signing the paperwork and co-parenting with you amicably. Because I won't let that nigga be the only one with an ace in the hole. You hear me?" The following morning, the Queen Mother was on it. She knew that there had been a reason why Ron had requested to retain the security provided by the St. James family. Everyone else who wasn't actively participating in the Notorious Five Families, but were the beneficiaries of the family's protection, had absolutely no problem with the families doing what they do the way that they do it. Security was often rotated in and out, and responsibility for that security often shifted from one family to another. Ron had said that he wanted to retain the same security for himself, his wife, and his children because it was more convenient where communication was concerned. Anya's inability to hear could become an issue if there was a threat to her safety and the soldiers assigned to protect her were unable to quickly communicate instruction, warnings, or information that Anya would need to remain safe. And while nearly every guard assigned to the family complex in Denton from every one of the five families had been required to learn ASL, the Queen Mother had decided to honor Ron's wishes. But even in her 60s, her memory was long. And they ain't call her Queen Bee for nothing. Her observation skills were on point, and she missed very little. So she hadn't missed when Ron, who, as an experienced attorney, knew how to quickly put his poker face on, had allowed a moment of fear to pass across his eyes when he'd been informed that his security would be rotated out. The Queen Mother let him make his argument to retain the St. James team that had been assigned to him and Anya, and let him think that that argument had been persuasive. But she'd inserted several Baptiste soldiers in the mix, and she'd filed away that look that she'd seen in Ron's eyes, and every other small detail about his actions, his character, his words, and so on, into her mental file cabinet. While it was very well possible that Ron had went to such great lengths to prevent Anya from finding out about his affair, it was way more likely that there was something else at play. And the Queen Mother was going to find out what that was. And she was going to start her investigation at the top. When Catherine answered the phone, she was not at all surprised to find her sister-in-law Bella on the other end. In her strong Trinidadian accent, she asked Bella, "What took you so long?" And Bella said, "If you were expecting my call, why you ain't call me?" Catherine said, "Now why would I show all my cards? I don't know what you know, or what you just suspect." The Queen Mother said, "Well, how about you tell me everything, and we can eliminate all confusion?" And Catherine feigned ignorance. The Queen Mother said, "Tell me everything you know so far about what's going on with my daughter and her husband." Catherine said, "All that I know for sure is that Anya put her husband out, and that of all the people in the world, I was the first person he chose to call. And that didn't sit right with me. I was fully prepared to honor the commitment that I'd made to Ron. I told him that if you ever came asking me any questions, I wouldn't give you any answers. I'd refer you to him and encourage him
to tell you everything. But from my last conversation with him, it's clear that he thinks that he's smarter than the average bear. And if there's one thing that I hate to be manipulated. And while Catherine told the Queen Mother everything that she knew, Anya was preparing to meet with her husband. Just as her mother had predicted, he'd sent her a text message with a time and a place to meet and a screenshot of one of the messages that the man her brother had killed for her sent her when he was stalking and harassing her. Anya was going to the meeting, but not because she was afraid her secret would be revealed. She was going because she needed to see how far her husband was actually willing to go and why.
Be careful with me. I'm not who you play with. For the eyes of the Lord are in every place you touch. Covenant like it was temporary, but God don't play by what he made sacred. What you sow, you gon' reap. That's not shade, that's Galatians 6:7. Be careful with me.